Good morning, everyone. As the music sort of peters out, this is part of the soundtrack for produced by now if I can just get out of this. Oh, I cut it off at a wrong point, but hello, everybody. That was part of the score of Fahrenheit 451, the 1960s film by Bernard Herrmann. Bernard Herrmann, if any of you are interested, you can find it out there for sale, the complete thing. That's very relevant because so many things are being argued about, and perhaps few are more heated than, let me get a different thing going here. Okay. Few are more heated than artificial intelligence, and whether the term is being used correctly or not, what is it, and how will it impact our lives or affect? My husband doesn't like that term, impact, and I'm not crazy about it either. How will it affect our lives? Today, we're very fortunate to have one of the most popular speakers, and it's for his third or fourth time, Professor Tosi Adegbija. And Tosi has been very popular telling us about the Internet of Things, even the Internet of Shit, and all kinds of G5 innovations. He's one of the foremost experts in this field, and we're so honored to have him today. He teaches in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Arizona. And take it away, Tosi, and I will open your. Well, I'll unshare and then you can share.
Yeah, I'll share my.
Okay, end share is what I'm trying to do, and I can't figure out how to do it. Okay.
You're not sharing anymore.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, and I'll mute.
All right, can you all hear me okay? Can you see my screen? Okay, well, it's good to be here. It's like Gloria said, I'm a frequent flyer with this group, and I always have a great time interacting with you all. And that's just some information about me. I'm an associate professor at the University of Arizona, and I do research mostly in computer hardware, developing new kinds of hardware. I care about energy efficiency in computing, and that feeds into some of my work with quote unquote artificial intelligence as well. And I'll I talked a little bit about that last time I was here, so I won't talk about my hardware research during this conversation. But then the goal here is to talk a little bit about, and by the way, feel free to email me. That's my email address if you have any questions or comments or anything. But then the goal for the next few minutes is to talk about AI, which has been in our public consciousness for better or for worse. It's especially in the past few months, there's just been a ton of press and media and controversy about so-called artificial intelligence. And I'm sure most of you have heard of ChatGPT, which is the reason why AI has become so popular. And so my goal is to attempt to provide some context to what has been happening over the past few months. And the first question you might have is, or you might be asking, is AI going to kill us all? And the answer is yes. And that was a joke. AI is not going to kill us all. Like Gloria was saying earlier on, are we even there yet with AI? What does AI really mean? And I'll try to provide some context about this. In general, I think there are AI optimists and AI cynics. So there are people who think AI will solve all our problems, and there are those who think that AI will kill us all. I think it's important to give some context into how I think about AI. I think about the AI in the generic form. A lot of times when people say AI, they actually mean machine learning, but then we'll talk more about that later. I think of AI as a tool. I think of it similarly to the internet. The internet transformed our lives. It transformed how we live, work, socialize, and do business. It also has the capability to enable the worst of humanity. As if you've been on social media, you would know. And I think AI has the same potential, maybe to a greater extent than the internet or the Internet of Things. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to try to attempt to demystify AI, and I'll keep using the term AI. It's just easy. So Bob, don't get mad at me. Gloria, please forgive me. But then I'll try to provide some context and take you on a journey with respect to AI and its potential influence on society, some of the potential issues with AI, and some of the technological advancements that have enabled it to be propelled into our social consciousness. So, feel free to ask questions. If you have questions as I go along, you're welcome to either interrupt me or post in the chat box, or wait until we're done. I shouldn't go more than 20, 25 minutes, and then we can have a discussion then. So what is AI anyway? What is artificial intelligence? Simply put, artificial intelligence is a field of computer science that enables computers or machines to mimic human behavior. And the goal of AI, and I think AI is still very aspirational today, the goal of AI is to simulate or automate human intelligence. And I think that the fascination, I think human beings are fascinated with human intelligence and the ability to recreate human intelligence in other quote unquote creatures or in machines and in non-human things. So for example, we get excited when dogs do things that seem human, when dogs seem intelligent. Human beings get excited about that. But then I would argue that this fascination with artificial intelligence actually goes way back to, much earlier in time. One of my favorite examples is the Greek myth of Pygmalion, where a Cypriot sculptor falls in love with his statue, and the god, and obviously it's a myth, but then the Aphrodite, the goddess of love, makes the statue real. In fact, I would argue as well that part of the fascination with creating life out of nothing, or artificial intelligence, is and my mom will hate that I'm saying this, but then the Greek, Jewish myths about creation, for example, in Genesis 1 and 2, where God created man from an inanimate object, from dust. I think that myth was part of the fascination with artificial intelligence. And as early as the 1600s, René Descartes pondered the possibility of machines that could one day think and make decisions. More recently, the British mathematician Alan Turing in the 20th century, who is currently considered one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence, developed what is known as the Turing test, which is a controversial test used to determine whether or not a machine is capable of demonstrating human-like intelligence. And he proposed using what is known as the imitation game, which is where a human judge interacts with a machine and a human through written messages and then tries to guess which is which. And the idea is that if the machine is able to fool the judge to think it is human frequently enough, then the machine can be considered intelligent. And the truth is that, so no machine has definitively passed the Turing test so far. There's been some cases where machines have been claimed to have passed the test. There was a case in 2014 where a machine was able to fool judges 33% of the time for a 5-minute conversation. But then the test was very restricted in topic and scope. And in most scenarios, claims of machines passing the Turing test have been met with skepticism. And so, and by the way, the Turing test also has a lot of critiques. So just because a machine is able to fool a human judge doesn't mean the machine is intelligent. The test only focuses on linguistic behavior, doesn't account for things like general knowledge. And in fact, in our current conversation about AI, computer scientists and practitioners try to distinguish between AI and AGI, because current AI systems are usually very task specific. AGI is artificial general intelligence, so which is something humans exhibit. And so the idea of current AI is that they are trained to do something specific and they can do that very well, right? But then whether or not, I don't think we are close to AGI at all. But then the Turing test doesn't take that into account, doesn't take the idea of consciousness into account, or creativity, which I think is something unique or that we can't recreate in computers. Problem solving, the Turing test is very subjective and subject to bias, lacks common sense. But then, Alan Turing is considered to have set some of the foundations for how we think about artificial intelligence today. More recently, in the 1950s and 60s, we developed what are known as rule-based systems. So those are a form of quote unquote AI, where essentially you have a knowledge base, a set of rules, and an inference engine. And what the knowledge base is just a bunch of rules. And you can make inferences based on those rules. So for example, if a patient has a fever and a cough, then the patient may have a cold. If a patient has a fever and a rash, then the patient may have measles. If the patient has measles, then the patient should be isolated and treated. So you have a knowledge base like that, and you can put in some of the data about the patient, and the system is able to make a prediction about what you should do for the patient. In 1966, a machine called ELIZA, which was developed by MIT, was probably one of the first chatbots that was created and could communicate through text, and it was essentially a rule-based system, could not learn from conversations, had a bunch of rules that could be programmed, and you could interact with the chatbot based on that. More recently, in 97, the Deep Blue was a machine created by IBM. It was a supercomputer that was able to defeat Garry Kasparov, the chess world champion. But then all it did, again, this was on that rule-based system, and all it did was calculated every possible option. So essentially, it was a brute force mechanism for determining what the next move in chess was going to be. So there's a comment in the chat. Present AI is equivalent to what animal? Amoeba, tardigrade, or flea, or what? I don't know what animal it's equivalent to. I think, and this is personal opinion, I think it is probably smarter than in terms of, and I'll talk more about large language models and what they do, for example. I think it's more capable than a lot of animals. But it's I don't know, it's a difficult question to answer, what animal it's equivalent to. But then, so the inspiration for artificial intelligence, actually a lot of times when people say artificial intelligence, what they actually mean is machine learning. And the reason for that is rule-based systems, like I said before, are a function of explicitly defining the rules based on which the machine should, quote unquote, think. But then when you have so much data, as we do in our world today, both human-generated and thing-generated data, going back to the idea of the Internet of Things, there is just so much data. You may have heard of the term big data. That just means there's a ton of data. And you can't write enough rules to actually quote unquote think. I'm using think in very broad terms. You can write enough rules for the machines to make any reasonable decisions. And so we've evolved into what is called machine learning. And the inspiration for this, and going back to Bob's question about what animals it's equivalent to, this is inspired by the human brain. It is definitely not anywhere near the capabilities of the human brain, but then that's the inspiration. And the idea of machine learning is that rather than programming algorithms to do something specific, the algorithms actually learn patterns in data. So instead of, for example, writing an algorithm to recognize a dog, give it a bunch of pictures of dogs so that it learns the patterns. And machine learning has evolved a lot. In fact, all the current large language models like ChatGPT all are based on machine learning algorithms, on very powerful machine learning algorithms. One of the more recent advancements in machine learning is what is called deep neural networks. Again, these are inspired by the human brain, where you have an input layer. So say, for example, pictures of dogs, you provide some pictures of dogs and you have a bunch of neurons, which are essentially computing nodes that receive some data. The data is usually some numbers. They perform some computations. The neurons each have weights, update the value of the input based on their weights, and then pass it on to, later neurons in the layer. So it's called a deep neural network because it has, multiple hidden layers. Essentially, when you have at least one hidden layer, that's considered a deep neural network. And they can pass the data through the neurons, generate an output, and then there's a process for updating the weights, a process for learning to update the weight based on the difference between the predicted output and the actual output. So say, for example, a dog prediction versus predicting something else. It can update its weights. There's a process called backpropagation where the weights through the layers are updated. And deep neural networks have become extremely powerful today. In fact, deep neural networks have outperformed human beings in some recognition tasks, especially like image recognition, for example. And a bunch of different applications for deep neural networks. So Bob has a comment there. Deep Blue did more than just projecting many moves ahead. It's learned the opponent's style in real time and anticipated his moves. So the learning there, it actually wasn't learning so essentially it's generated all the possible possibilities of moves that could be carried out, in the chess game. So I'm not a chess player or anything, but then it essentially was a rule-based system. It wasn't learning like you would with current machine learning models. So a bunch of things going on today with artificial intelligence, facial recognition. And one of the things I wanted to point out from here is that if you are, although the most popular AI that has, that we've heard of in the past few months is ChatGPT, there's a lot more that has been done with machine learning that we interact with every day. So there's facial recognition, for example. If you unlock your phone with your face or with your fingerprint, that's some form of machine learning. That's some form of AI. Airport security. If you've traveled internationally through San Francisco recently, you most likely did not need to show your passport. You just, there's a device that takes a picture of you and you're able to walk through. Autonomous vehicles. If you visit San Francisco, there are taxis today that don't have drivers. There are companies that focus on creating these autonomous vehicles. There's a company in Tucson, actually, that is focused on creating autonomous trucks. There is healthcare, predicting disease risk. Machine learning models have been shown to be sometimes more accurate or faster in identifying potential diseases from medical images than human beings have been. Natural language processing, which is probably what we know for the most part as AI today. If you use Google devices or Alexa, all those use machine learning. And, obviously there's ChatGPT, which is the most popular large language models, a group of applications for AI. And the basic idea of large language models is that you feed a bunch of data into deep neural networks. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And the transformer is a kind of machine learning model that was developed by Google actually in 2017. And what it does, without going into any low-level details of how the model works, but it uses what is known as an attention mechanism that allows it to develop a more global context of input. So there's another kind of model called recurrent neural networks, which is more sequential and has a more local view of your input. But then the powerful nature of transformers is that they have this global view of input, and they're able to generate what seems like more reasoned output based on the inputs that you've given them. And what that means also is that the technology needed to advance a lot of these large language models currently already exists. And all they need is just more computing power to create more, much larger models and process much larger data. And what the ChatGPT essentially does is it's actually not thinking. It's essentially predicting the next word in a sentence based on the transform model. But then it's powerful enough that it seems like it's actually thinking and giving a reasoned response to whatever query or whatever prompt you give the model. But then all it's doing, and this is a very simplistic description of what is actually happening, but then it's predicting next words in a sequence. And there are a bunch of other large language models. ChatGPT is the most popular, but then there are other alternatives. There's Google's Bard, Anthropic's Claude. So they call it Claude. And Anthropic is a smaller company that was created by some early executives of OpenAI, which developed ChatGPT. And they left OpenAI because they had a different view. And this gets us into the topic of the bad about quote unquote AI. They had different views about how to develop the large language models. OpenAI has a just develop it philosophy, while Anthropic seems to care about placing a lot more guardrails to the large language models. There is Meta's Llama, which is open source, and that means that anyone can have access to the source code that generates the data. And one of the things to note here, as you see, most of the companies that are involved with the large language models are big companies or companies that have a ton of money behind them. And the reason for that is because the power of these models is a function of how much computing you can do, how much data. So these companies have access to all our data, and they're able to create very large, complex models, and train the models to do very powerful tasks. So the large language models have lots of uses. So the way I think of them is as a tool, rather than some. I personally think they could be very transformative, but then I think of them as tools that can be used to augment human work and human intelligence. So, for example, I use AI tools a lot. I use ChatGPT specifically, and I use Claude, and I've used Google's Bard, and Microsoft backs OpenAI, and they have a version of the GPT-4. It's essentially it's a model that works with Bing, the Bing search engine, so you're able to search the internet, and essentially it's like search on steroids. That's and for that it could be a very powerful tool, especially for research. So in my case, for example, I no longer I write lots of research papers, and so one of the most time-consuming things I do is fixing my students' grammar. And that just generally is not a very good use of my time. And now what I have them do is proofread, they use ChatGPT to proofread their work so that when I'm working on their papers, I'm able to focus on technical content and not on grammatical issues. Recently, I created a data set that, that I presented at a conference in Greece a few weeks ago called JazzNet. And, I programmed this with Python. This was last year. And I was thinking of how much faster, it took me a few months to write the program. And I was thinking of how much faster it would have been if ChatGPT existed. And ChatGPT will not write anything useful from scratch for you, but then it's a very powerful tool, for example, for debugging code. Usually what I do when I'm debugging code is search the internet using Google, and it takes a lot of time, but then ChatGPT is able to do that a lot faster and provide suggestions for solutions to problems. For writing, it's a very bland writer. I don't think ChatGPT is a good writer currently, but then it could be very useful for brainstorming and giving good ideas. AI can also be used to generate images. So there are machine learning models like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, which can generate images. The images are generally not very high quality yet, but then they're improving very rapidly. So obviously, it's not all good. There's a lot of bad that comes with that AI. So there's a comment from Alice. As I understand it, the reason some people are so afraid that AI will kill us all is because AI gives people the ability to create so many effective film or image deepfakes that can make anyone political figures, e.g., appear to be anything, create political chaos. Do you think that's one of the real and serious dangers AI presents? Yes, and I'll get to that in a second. Actually, that's my biggest fear with AI currently. The first thing I have here is the idea of bias. So AI is, the quality of the AI system depends on the quality of the data, right? And if the data is human generated, there's a good chance that the AI system will reflect the bias that is in the human. Essentially, the AI doesn't think for itself, it learns from the data it is given. And so there's a whole research field right now that is focused on bias in AI. And my second point, and like I said, going back to Alice's comment and Bob's comment, is the two things that are different: hallucination and misinformation. I put them in the same point because they're kind of related, but then for space as well. Hallucination is where an AI system, so you, and it's a lot better now, but then, a few months ago with ChatGPT, just type in some random name and say, who is this person? And it gives you a detailed description of the person that doesn't exist, right? Or you ask it a question, so it wouldn't say, I don't know, it just answers the question with a lot of confidence. So I tried this a lot last semester when, before an exam, because I give my students take-home exams, I gave ChatGPT all my exam questions, and it answered every single thing very confidently, but then all the answers were wrong. And I was never worried about my students cheating using ChatGPT because it just, I told them explicitly, if you use ChatGPT for this exam, you're going to fail because it hallucinates. That's when it just makes things up. You might have heard recently of the lawyer who was sanctioned for citing cases that did not exist because he used ChatGPT for legal research. And so what I tell my students, as much as I encourage them to use ChatGPT as a tool, you need to double check every single thing. You need to make sure, for example, if you copy a paragraph into ChatGPT to fix your grammar, make sure it hasn't inserted any wrong technical details into your paragraph, because it does that a lot. So that's what researchers call hallucination. But then the bigger, and I think the scarier thing, is the misinformation. And this is my opinion. I hope I'm wrong about this. I think the 2024 election season will be a shit show because of AI. Because like Alice said, you can create deepfakes. Bob mentioned images are no longer considered good evidence in court because of AI, because you can generate any images. We've seen political candidates already use, or political campaigns already use AI. The DeSantis campaign used, an AI-generated image of Trump hugging Fauci. The Trump campaign has used an AI-generated video of Joe Biden, doing things that he actually did not do. You can, especially for public figures, if you have enough samples of voices or videos, you can regenerate people's voices and people's images. And so, I don't know what the solution to this would be, especially for the 2024 season, but I can already expect that it will be, for lack of a better word, a shit show. There's also privacy and security issues. As you know, the power of the AI is a function of the data, and a lot of the data is private. So you might have some data on your Facebook, for example, or things you've said on Twitter, and all of these data get fed into AI systems. AI can infer sensitive information. Machine learning specifically is being used to infer sensitive information even from anonymized data. So you might have what you think is public data from your personal profiles, but then that can be used to reverse engineer more sensitive information about you. There's also the challenge of job displacement. There are several things that AI can do better and faster than human beings. So like summarizing text, for example, or generating information from data, from large amounts of data. AI systems or machine learning systems can do that a lot faster than human beings. The current writer's strike in Hollywood is partly driven by fears of job displacement by AI. I talked earlier about driverless taxis. That means taxi drivers losing their jobs, copy editing, and a bunch of things that AI systems or machine learning systems can do better. And I have thoughts, which I'm not going to go into right now, about the ethics of some of these systems. So I think that's a conversation for another day. There's also more dangerous things like autonomous weapons and decision-making in warfare, essentially machines that can kill, literally. There's been some simulations where a machine, like say for a drone, for example, actually, I think this was done by the Pentagon. I may be wrong about this, but then there was a simulation where the machine disagreed with the humans about who should be killed in warfare, right? And that could make for a very dangerous scenario if machines are able to make, especially in the case like warfare, in cases that are very nuanced, machines don't have the capacity for that kind of nuance or that decision making on the fly. The complexity required in those decisions are not. Well, these machines are not capable of that complexity. And as usual, every time I've interacted with you all, I always talk about some of the problems of these systems, and I never offer any solutions. And there's some research going on these different areas, including detecting misinformation in AI systems and ways to mitigate job placement and so on. But the goal of this is to, make you all aware of what is going on. So Bob has a comment here. There's evidence of human intervention in ChatGPT. A colleague started asking it leading questions about ICBMs, those intercontinental ballistic missiles, until it blabbed something that must have been classified. Then that answer got erased and the more blunt answer replaced it. Yes, actually, it's not just evidence. There's definitely human intervention in ChatGPT. In fact, that's one thing to take note of as well. When you use ChatGPT, it's not private. And in fact, that's one of the things I've been interested in my own fascination with these large language models, how to create private large language models. And that's one of the reasons why I think Facebook's Llama might be a really powerful tool with that respect, because what you do with Facebook's Llama is that you copy the model onto your own computer. So obviously you need a powerful computer in that case. You copy the model to your computer and it runs on your computer. So that way, when you ask it questions, it doesn't go outside of your computer. And so there is no way for some human being to change how it responds to your questions. But then when you type something into ChatGPT, that data is being stored by OpenAI, and they're actually using the data to improve the system. Another point about that with the human intervention, and that relates to the ethics of AI, is how the systems are trained. So OpenAI, for example, trains their systems with reinforcement learning with humans in the loop. And that's one major difference between OpenAI and a company like Anthropic, for example. Anthropic uses what they call constitutional AI. And the idea there is they're trying to mitigate the amount of bias that is inserted by human beings by using what they call a constitution. So it's essentially, it's an actual document based on a bunch of different resources that they use to guide how the AI responds to prompts. Of course, you can also ask the question, how about the bias in those documents? So the documents are based on things like Apple's privacy policy, some UN documents on human rights, and so on. But then again, the point here is that there is human intervention, and what some companies are trying to look at is how to make these systems a little bit less biased. There's also the ethics of, the humans that are used in training ChatGPT, for example, are paid very little and they're worked extremely hard. They're typically people from other countries who are used as, for that human in the loop reinforcement learning. And I think there's a lot of ethical issues with that as well. So I'll round off with just a few thoughts about the future of AI. I think it could be very powerful. And I'm using AI as a generic term really for machine learning in this case. There's a lot of things that can be achieved using AI, healthcare diagnostics, business strategy, automation, and efficiency, automating manually repetitive tasks, personalized services. Like I said, I've used ChatGPT quite a bit. So I traveled to Rhodes and Athens, Greece a few weeks ago, and I used ChatGPT to get some ideas on how to plan my travel. I'm traveling to Istanbul in less than 2 weeks, and a trip I'm extremely excited about. And I've used ChatGPT to help with some of the travel plans. I generate travel with as little plans as possible, but then just to get some ideas on what to do. And what ChatGPT is to me in this case is it's just a faster Google search. So rather than, when I search on Google, rather than having to look through a bunch of different results, what ChatGPT does is it summarizes those results for me. So it's essentially a good tool for lazy people. And by the way, Google also has their large language model incorporated with Google now. So even with Google search, you can have at the top of the page, you can have a summary of results that helps to give you a good sense of the broad thoughts by different people on different web pages are summarized at the top of the Google page. So I think it's very powerful for that. There's a lot of technical challenges. One that I find really interesting is the idea of explainability in AI. A lot of AI systems, especially as they become more powerful, and again, this is more specifically machine learning models. Neural networks are generally unpredictable. And as they become more complex, they become like black boxes. And even the top experts in the field can't really explain why their models work the way they do. Right. And that could be a problem, because if systems are this unpredictable, that could lead to really dangerous outcomes in high stakes domains like healthcare and criminal justice and so on. There's a lot of work going on to address the AI hallucination problem. Actually, in the past few months, I think I've seen quite a bit of improvement with ChatGPT. There is artificial general intelligence. So that's where it's true AI, where it's not just current AI systems excel at specific tasks, but then the goal of AGI is to outperform humans at most economically valuable work and essentially help the systems improve in common sense reasoning, abstraction, creativity. We're not anywhere, I don't think we're anywhere near artificial general intelligence, but then there's a lot of work going on in this domain. One thing I care about a lot with AI is the energy consumption issue. So like I said earlier on, the AI models, the powerful AI models rely on lots of processing. So lots of computers processing tons of data. And that's why only companies with lots of money are able to achieve, very powerful, or create very powerful models. What that implies is that these are computers, typically GPUs, that consume tons of energy. GPUs they're called graphics processing units, are the most popularly used for machine learning models, are very power hungry, right? And one of my some things I do research on are spiking neural networks, which are potentially a lot more power efficient than traditional artificial neural networks in machine learning. So Bob has a comment. Have you seen the electronic text banners at the Suntran trolley stops? They show AI-generated poems from the UA Poetry Center. Interesting. I've not seen that. So that's another interesting thing you could do. Actually, you can, and I've actually played with this model. So there's an open source GPT version called Private GPT, where you can feed in some of your own data to that system, and it's called ingesting data. So it ingests your data, and then it begins to spit out stuff that is similar to your data. You may have heard that Sarah Silverman and a bunch of celebrities are suing OpenAI and other companies for using their work. So you can go in ChatGPT right now and type, "Write me a joke in the voice of Sarah Silverman." And what it has done, it has ingested the data and it's able to replicate that language. And so that's likely what is, I've not seen the Suntran trolley banners, but then that's likely what is happening there. The AI model has, or the machine learning model has ingested some data from the UA Poetry Center and is generating new poems based on that. So I also think there's a need for regulation. Again, I know the government is thinking very deeply about this, but then apart from the government regulation, it's also important for the tech companies, to the extent that we can trust tech companies, which I don't. But then, we can always hope that there is some decency, some human decency among the tech executives about self-regulating their own products. And of course, I think more importantly for us here is public input and engagement. I think it's important for us to engage with AI. I think similar to the internet, it will pervade our lives, whether we like it or not. And I think we will do better by engaging with AI. I've heard people say AI will steal your job. I don't think so. I don't think AI will replace programmers anytime soon. I think there are things that are unique to the human experience that AI will never replicate, regardless of how complicated or how complex and how powerful it is. But I think you can be a lot more effective at your job if you understand AI better. Of course, if you're retired, then you probably don't care about that. All right, so that's all I have for you today. I think AI will be very impactful, And I hope that that we'll engage with AI. And I encourage you to play with ChatGPT. It's free to use. There's a paid version. I use a paid version, but I actually don't think you need a paid version to interact with it and just see some of the. I think it's pretty cool. I work in this general area, but I'm really fascinated by the field of mostly machine learning. But then I hope that you all engage with it and see how it might improve your productivity. Thanks for listening. That's all I got for you. And thanks for all the comments in the chat and all the questions. And I will, I guess I might have a few minutes to take any comments or questions.
Oh, we have plenty of time. Set this
Okay.
up for 2 hours.
I'll stop sharing my screen. And
thank you so much, everybody. You can unmute if you wish. And for Jim, who came in a bit late, I guess had to come in late, we're going to put this up on YouTube, but you'll get the question and answer, and then you can go to YouTube and see the entire recording later.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I am sorry I missed the lecture.
Well, it'll be available usually by the next day, if not later today. I'll get it
Okay,
up.
it's gonna be great, Alice.
That's Gloria.
Oh, that was Gloria. I thought, okay, excuse me. Thank you, Gloria.
I have something more from that Galatea. I have a little snippet of the synopsis. I think it goes into so much that's very current. Let me see if I can just cut and paste it into chat. Or no, wait, what I could do you mind if I do a share?
sure, go for it.
Okay, because then I can just share it off that screen. Let me see. So we will have to, you've already stopped your share. And now if I can find it, oh, here it is. And
So while you do that, I'll just comment on Bob's comment or question. Will the writers strike accelerate the use of AI to write scripts? I don't think so. The current AI that we have will not write good scripts. I'm trying to think of a good movie that had a really good script, and I just don't think you can replicate human creativity that way. And that's why I had that last point about AI will not steal your job. People who understand AI will. So maybe AI can help to speed up the writing process, but then coming up with innovative ideas. Sure, AI might help to write a bunch of scripts that are boring, which most scripts really are boring. And so yes, maybe AI will help to do that, but then I think the good writers will remain irreplaceable. What do you think, Bob?
Bob, are you there? Bob?
I don't know. I just don't know. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, right? But then I think good writers will still have a job. So like I said before, I've used AI quite a bit in my own writing, especially my research writing. And what I find is, now I can actually identify when my students use ChatGPT to generate text. I can tell just by the kind of language it uses. So it is very bland. It is very boring. And, I don't think AI will replicate good writers, at least not yet.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I know I came in late. I don't know anything about what Tosi talked about, but I don't know. What I'd like to know is that did you discuss general super artificial intelligence?
Very cursorily. So I assume you mean artificial general intelligence, where AI is able to do everything or more things than just one, which is what most AI systems are today. So we didn't discuss it in detail. I did mention it as one of the technical challenges that we're currently experiencing. There's a lot of interest in AGI, artificial general intelligence. I don't think we're anywhere near there yet. I don't think we have the So I don't know what, and I don't think anyone knows right now what the underlying technology will be required to achieve that. I'm a bit more skeptical about the capability to, about the possibility of ever achieving that kind of intelligence in computers outside of human beings. I have a very high view of human creativity and human intelligence that I don't think can be easily replicated in computers, but I may be wrong. So yeah, I don't think we're close. And I don't know anyone who thinks that we're close at this point.
Well, some say that an artificial entity could be created that would develop itself, that would be able to, through access of knowledge. I read the other day that Wikipedia was essential for the creation of ChatGPT, and that it could not have been created without that knowledge base. And so if ChatGPT can access all of the known, everything that is known to man, why can't it, what's to prevent it from creating successive iterations of itself that are, successively improving? And I guess what I want to ask you is, I mean, just generally, do you think that it is possible for an artificial entity to achieve consciousness and self-awareness?
So that last question, no, I don't. But again, that I should be clear that is personal opinion and not based on any scientific research or anything. I don't think computers will ever achieve consciousness. Going back to, and again, this is more philosophical than anything else. But then going back to the point of AI learning from itself, there's actually some research about this right now where it's being shown that when AI learns from, so you're right that AI learned from human-generated text like Wikipedia, Twitter, Reddit was a very powerful, essentially any scenario in which humans interact. Social media is very important and powerful. Human knowledge is important. But then the AI is only as good as the human knowledge. When AI begins to learn from itself, it actually begins to break down. And that there's some recent research that is showing that because of the increase in the amount of AI-generated texts on the internet today, new AI models that are being trained based on previous AI-generated text tend to be worse than expected, worse than previous AI models, actually. And what that tells me is that, that the human creativity. So when it comes to knowledge, and that's why AI systems can build a bomb, for example, right? Because that is based on knowledge. But then I think there is more power to creativity that feeds into. I think the human experience is more than just knowledge or more than just facts, for example. I think there's a lot more that goes into what makes us human than what computers can successfully replicate. Okay. Yeah, so I'm a bit of an optimist. And by the way, in this respect, I'm in disagreement with one of the, he's known as the godfather of AI, Jeff Hinton, who worked at Google for a long time. And he thinks AI could be, existentially detrimental to society. I'm a bit more optimistic than he is about AI, but also he knows a lot more about AI than I do, so you should probably listen to him and not me. But then I don't think we're anywhere near. I'm more concerned, and I don't think you were here when I talked about it. I'm more concerned about the impact of AI in misinformation, right? And so I think the election season next year will be, it's actually pretty bad right now already. I think to just get to be a lot worse with time.
If I may ask another question just to find out, where your thinking is. So what do you think of this idea of the singularity that Ray Kurzweil describes? The singularity, the idea that there will be a point at which human beings and machines will merge somehow, and so in fact, I have to say that frankly, I don't think that human beings are doing a good job of dealing with the threats that we face. I think that it's absolutely stupid that we continue to have this threat of nuclear annihilation. The dumbest machine would see how stupid it is that we continue to do that, because we cannot shake these power relations that are primitive. And I think that when it concerns me that we have governments that are trying to restrain a entity that could shake up the current power relations that are primitive in themselves. We can't seem to solve this climate crisis issue that is just dumb. So frankly, I see this government control stuff as a desire to control and preserve the current power relations that this oligarchy enjoys. And they don't want to see this enlightenment emerge that will, tell people, yeah, this makes no sense what we're doing. And so that I don't, Apple and Google, and the people that are researching it, they don't worry me as much as government control. So we have Joe Biden. Having this conference with these AI scientists saying, hey, you guys are going to keep a lid on this, right? You're not going to let this get out of control so that we are threatened. The people that are causing these stupid wars, that have these incredibly, these nuclear weapons arsenals, and continuing to push the limits closer and closer and closer, to where we have like 9 minutes to respond. The Russians have 9 minutes to respond to a question of a nuclear attack. I put my money on a machine any day when I see how stupid this is. I'm sorry, I don't want to. It's a rant, and it's a soapbox I just got on, but I just want to put that in there.
So Jim, I work with machines a lot, and I will not put my money on machines for anything.
Okay.
I think the AI problem is obviously a human problem. The AI can be a powerful tool for good, just like the internet, right? It could be a powerful tool for good. It could also be a powerful tool for ill if humans, use it as such. I think the importance of constraints is, so for example, I don't think an AI system should be able to give instructions on how to build a bomb easily, for example. I think that would be a reasonable constraint that can be put on an AI system. I think that's what from what I understand, that's what the Biden administration is doing. I don't think it's a power grab. There might be power grabs in other ways. I don't think the AI involvement in any way is. Again, I may be wrong. I don't think that's the case. I'm more concerned about governments, more dictators like Russia and China using AI for misinformation, for example. I think that's a serious threat, or for building powerful weapons that are autonomous.
The New York Times is full of misinformation.
That's a question we can discuss.
They perpetuate the stupid policies that caused this war in the Ukraine, for instance, because of the misinformation they give us.
I think that's
I'm sorry.
that's very off topic for us, but then I
I'm
don't think
sorry.
that's right
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
I think Russia created the war, not the New York Times,
Okay.
not even close. But then we have some comments in the chat. So how do you use AI? How do you get started? What are students doing when they use AI for lab reports or papers? So one way to get started that's from Kerry. To get started, so if you just Google ChatGPT, it opens up I think you might need to sign up for an account, but then it's a free account. And it has actually, how about I demonstrate very quickly? So I'll just share my screen one more time. So I assume you can see my screen.
Mhm.
So I'm on chat.openai.com. So this is a specific tool that is built by OpenAI company. And if you have a free account, you probably have access to just the GPT 3.5. And that's just the model. GPT is just the transformer model that is used for for ChatGPT.
Hand up. Hand up. My hand is up.
Yeah, go for it,
I
Gloria.
have tried it and it didn't give me any credits to use. You have to use credits for DAL-E. I was going to try an experiment with DAL-E and it said your credits are all used up. It didn't give me any.
Yeah, so DAL-E has more restrictions. And the reason for that is because it just requires more powerful computing to generate. So DAL-E is the one that generates images.
Yeah.
And that requires more powerful computing. So they have bigger restrictions. However, you can actually go to Bing, Gloria, for free.
Okay.
You can use DAL-E on Bing. And so you can say, for example, generate an image illustrating XYZ using Bing, and it does that for free. So you don't need credits on
So
DAL-E.
you just go to Bing and you put text in and it will generate images.
How about I show you right now?
Okay.
So Bing, Bing.com. You also need to be a subscriber, but it's free. So I'll go to chat and let's see. Oh, it's still not, let's see. I need to change my account here.
So if I'm using Windows 7, it will be okay.
And it works better with the Microsoft Edge, the Microsoft browser, excuse me.
Oh, so you can't use Firefox.
So I've not tried on Firefox. I usually use it on so this is the Microsoft's own browser. But then if I go to chat here and I say, please generate an image illustrating a group of people in a Zoom meeting. And so it takes a few seconds to do that, but then it's using DAL-E to do that.
Sure, I can generate blah, blah, blah.
And then so you have a bunch of images, and these are all new generated images so you can see it's powered by DAL-E up here.
So these don't exist as stills anywhere else?
Correct, these don't exist anywhere.
These are
presumably
composites. Okay.
Right. And the quality is questionable. So one thing you'll notice, look at the fingers, for example. It still doesn't do a good job with generating fingers.
It's got its little issues.
Yeah, so they are improving on that as time goes on. But then going back to Carrie's question, so here's ChatGPT, and I can say, explain how ChatGPT works in very simple terms, and it generates a bunch of text explaining what it does. And you can write pretty much any prompt. So these are called prompts here. And you can write any prompt here and it generates things. And one of my favorite things to do, I have my students, for example, I copy this text. Actually, a better example, I'll copy the text from one of my last slide. And I'll say, I like to be polite, so I still write, please, convert the following bullet points to a paragraph of text. And then I copy the bullet points here. And it generates some text, right? So one thing you can do, for example, which I've actually done this before, is while writing NSF, so I do reviews for the National Science Foundation, and I write a bunch of bullet points and copy it to ChatGPT and ask it to convert them into paragraphs. And it does a much better job now of maintaining just the thoughts in your bullet point. So a few months ago, it would hallucinate and add more information.
It's hallucinating even here because I'm in rhetoric and it's changing what you're saying rhetorically. It is actually attributing a certain agent, and it's adding as a society that changes the agent. It also says imperative rather than important. That's a big shift in rhetoric.
Sure. So rhetoric, it does change, but then the ideas remain the same. Yes.
From your perspective, what you're saying, it's a minor problem. From mine, that's major. That it's
Gotcha.
the active agent, and it's changing an important to imperative. In rhetorical terms, that's a huge difference.
I see. So, Carrie, does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
That means it's making unfortunate changes. Very unfortunate. No, that is terrible. What you just did shows how dangerous this is, because, I mean, suppose it said it might be important for us to consider war, and then you change it to it's imperative for us to actively consider war. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So I'm just going back to the chat. So Alice had a question: does the chatbot directly interact with the internet, or is it limited in some way with what it can access? So the Bing, what I showed you here does have real-time access to the internet. Where is it now? So this has real-time access to the internet. And you'll see here, you have different settings. You can have a more creative, where it takes more, what's the word? It's not really creative, but then it tries to be essentially more balanced or more precise. More precise is basically like doing an internet search. But then Bing does have access to the internet. ChatGPT does not. ChatGPT is trained based on internet data. Actually, let's see. So they did have in beta a version of ChatGPT that could access the internet, but then actually that's been removed. So if you want real-time access to the internet, you will need to use the Bing version of, it's essentially the same model, it's ChatGPT, but then the Bing version accesses the internet in real time. The ChatGPT was trained based on the internet until 2021, right? And so a lot of information after 2021 would likely be incorrect, or factual information. So for example, I did ask who was the Speaker of the House, for example, and it says as of my last time, so it's a little bit more deliberate in saying as of the last time I was trained, the Speaker of the House was Nancy Pelosi, right? So again, that's the limitation of some of these models. They're trained based on data or information that they are provided at a given time.
And
Yeah,
Hey.
could I return to this novel, because I think it is useful to us, because what it does, if you want to take it down, Galatea 2.2 by the American writer Richard Powers. And it's, as you said, you know, the Pygmalion myth, where it's like My Fair Lady, where the statue comes to life. This novel, way back in 1995, actually works with the very thin membrane between machine learning and feeling, empathy, emotions. And I think it's the only science fiction novel that I've read that has this good a grasp of, you know, the what would you call it, contact zones between machine and human, and where do you draw the lines. So, you know, you could probably get it through your library online, but anyway, it's called Galatea 2.2. And some of you may already know this novel. I don't know if you do or not, but if you haven't read it.
thanks, Gloria.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I'm just looking through the chats to see other comments.
Oh, I have another hand up thing while you're looking.
Yeah.
Empathy. There's a lot of study in empathy and mapping the brain with fMRI to locate, you know, different emotions and where they're in the human brain. Oh, you're welcome. Is there any research on empathy and you know, machines, machine learning? They aren't learning empathy. How can they? They don't have, you know, the species similarity to be able to be empathetic with meatware. We're meatware. They're not meatware.
Yeah. So not that I know specifically, I suspect there must be. There's some research on empathy in machines. The kind of research I usually care about. So I think I mentioned this last time I was here. I'm working with a neuroscientist on trying to understand how the brain works better so that we can design some of these models to replicate the brain in their efficiency. So I care about the energy efficiency a lot, and I work with spiking neural networks. So we're trying to understand how, for example, you know, multi-scale encoding works in the brain, where the individual neurons in your brain are responsible for different scales of information. And that's one of the reasons, according to neuroscientists, why human beings are very efficient in recognition and memory. And so we're trying to replicate some of those processes in computers. But then, so I don't know, and I've not done any reading, so I'm just making shit up at this point. But then I don't know how easy it is to map empathy in the brain through scans. I suspect it's possible. And I don't know what that would look like.
They're doing
Oh,
it.
okay.
There's
Okay.
quite a lot of scanning where they show photos of a woman crying and then, you know, measure different, I don't know what the demographics are, but, you know, different demographics are
Gotcha.
showing the same pictures, and some might respond more. And then, you know, what's different about that person's variables in their background, you know, why they
Right.
don't respond to this and they do respond to that.
Well,
That makes
currently-
sense. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah.
So there's a writer called Marvin Minsky. I think his name is Marvin Minsky. He wrote the Emperor's New Mind. And there was a meeting between him and a anesthesiologist that works in the Department of Anesthesiology at Banner Health. His name is Stuart Hameroff. And so Hameroff speculates that there are not enough neural synapses in the brain to explain human thought. That's just, the capacity is too small. And he speculates that it is in the neuronal level, down all the way to the neuron, where the capacity is logarithmically expanded, the capacity for computation. And so that's something I think that there's some examination too. Hameroff has this this series called what is it? It's slipping my mind right now, but his ideas of consciousness, I think, are some that should be examined by people who are in the field of artificial intelligence, because I think that there's some insight there that may allow people who are on this course looking for artificial intelligence, if they are truly not necessarily wanting to limit the level of development that artificial intelligence can achieve. And I think that there is a tendency, such as you've expressed, to want to limit the, the power of artificial intelligence to prevent it from becoming conscious.
So, and thanks for that, by the way. That's very interesting. I don't think there's a tendency to prevent AI from becoming conscious. I just don't think it will happen, right? If it were possible, I don't think. So again, like I said, I work a lot with machines, and I don't trust machines.
Okay.
But then. I don't think it's possible, but I don't think anyone is trying to prevent it from happening. I don't, there was the letter written by a bunch of tech executives a while back about pausing the development of ChatGPT. I thought that was a bunch of BS. Right. It was a business. I mean, Elon Musk has created his own AI company now. It was more a business thing than any care for humanity. But I just don't think it's going to happen. Maybe it's, I may be wrong, but then I don't think it will. I guess we'll see in 50 years.
If I may interject, I remembered, it's called orchestrated objective reduction. That's Stuart Hameroff's theory. OR.
Orchestrated what?
Objective reduction.
I see it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Go ahead, Alice.
Could I just
No,
say?
I'll let Alice go. She may have had her hand up longer.
Oh, thanks. Just something I remember from a long time ago. A philosophy professor named Dreyfus. I don't remember his first name, but he wrote a book called something like What Computers Can't Do. And then there was another version of it, What Computers Still Can't Do, in which he said that consciousness must be embodied. That's one of the things that he put forward.
Yeah.
And so AI, unless it's part, I guess, of some sort of a Android, which we don't have yet, is not embodied. And so he suggested that consciousness must be embodied. Just something I remembered. So
Yes.
Thanks, Alice. And just to follow up on that, going back to the conversation with Jim, one of the reasons, so computers at the very basic level operate based on ones and zeros, right? And how you can extrapolate consciousness out of that is just beyond, I think ones and zeros are so limited that I feel like consciousness must be beyond that.
Not necessarily. If you follow the brain research, it's all negative charge, positive charge. It's like binary too.
Absolutely, yes. I'm speaking of computers right now.
Yeah, I mean, but in the brain, it's kind of binary too. You have the firing of synapses or not. They either fire or they don't. It's binary.
Yes. That actually, so one point about that is the machine learning as we have it today is actually not binary.
Okay.
And that's the distinction between artificial neural networks and spiking neural networks, which I work on.
Okay.
So we're trying, because spiking neural networks, like you said, the brain works with spikes, right? I wouldn't say binary exactly. It's like charge or no charge.
Yeah, charge.
Right. But then our current implementation of of the spiky neural networks are not able to achieve the same performance of artificial neural networks, right? And so when we try to replicate, and that's why the brain is so amazing, it's very efficient because it is quote unquote binary, it's spike or no spike, right? But then when we try to replicate that in our own systems, we're not able to achieve the same performance that the brain is able to achieve. So that's why they're called artificial neural networks, because the data that these neurons actually take in are continuous variables rather than the binary data that the brain uses. So that actually makes things even more complicated, I think. Yes, Gloria.
I want to challenge my husband who popped that thing into the chat about why don't they just code empathy in. That Bob, I don't know where you get this stuff sometimes, but
I'm on his side. I don't see why there's any limitation to.
how could they code empathy in?
I think you. In fact, I think that maybe machines have
These women are
a
all
lower
going like this,
limitation
and they're all-
to empathy than a lot of human beings. We've seen that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I think, again, I think that's more a human problem, a problem of bad people, and not a machine versus human problem. So I don't see how you would code empathy. Again, maybe you can. I can't visualize it in my brain. But then the idea of machines behaving better than human beings is just a function of there being bad people. And not it's so if you have a bad person program a machine, the machine will behave like the bad person as well. So the point is that the machine takes in the whatever data, or machine learning takes in the data that is fed, and that determines how it behaves.
Right, and see, Bob is sliding into the old Asimovian fallacy, if you want to put it that way, of the 3 laws of robotics: be nice to humans, don't kill humans. But your bad AI actor would go, yeah, I know all that, and here's my loop where I can go around it, you know.
Alice?
But that's why we're always nice to ChatGPT, right? You said, please give me, and I always say, thank you. And it says, do you need anything else? Oh, no, thank you. It's been very
Well,
helpful.
next it will be, yes, master.
No, I just wanted to be nice. And so I'm nice to it.
Yeah.
I'm nice to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, everyone, who invented the word robot? Come on. You're
Adel Chapek.
Yes. And
Adel Chapek.
when was it? Come on, when was it?
I don't know, early 20th century in
1920.
I'll ask
Process
ChatGPT.
Universal Robots.
Yeah, and all of these issues pretty much were in that play. And unfortunately, they put people in cardboard robot suits when they enacted on the stage, and that makes it seem goofy and old-fashioned. But go back and look at that little short script, it's there. And they're built with amino acids and things, whatever they didn't have exactly the same terminology in those days, but Chapek didn't have in mind, you know, he was messing with wet lab stuff, not all circuitry. So, you know, these things are, sometimes you can cross, you can use wet lab and amino acids and things, and then you can have circuitry as well, cyborgs. So,
and so yes, there'll be good robots and bad robots, Bob. Actually, last time I was here, I talked about one of the earlier, Microsoft created a chat bot that learned from Twitter, and within less than 24 hours, it began to tweet, you know, love for Hitler and a bunch of really bad stuff because it learned from people. Actually, it started by saying, you know, I love people, it's really nice here. And then with more time, it learned more things and began to be bad. So not just, you know, good robots can become bad when fed with more information, and vice versa as well.
Oh, question. So is that in response to word frequency counts and loops based on that and algorithms based on that? Because the word frequencies, as you get more and more data, and these huge corpora then incorporate all those bad statements.
Not exactly. Well, sentiment frequency. So there's
Sentiment
a field of machine learning called sentiment analysis, where the model is able to analyze. So, for example, actually a good use case is, say, reviews. You can analyze whether or not the review is positive or negative, and it's based on the occurrences of words, right? And so, they've trained the model to recognize that, okay, reviews that contain these words are bad or negative. And what happens is the model is able to, so I suspect models today would have been trained to learn that Hitler is not good, right? But then this was I think in 2015 or 16. This was early on in the whole game, and there were not enough. There was just a bunch of tweets, and the chat bot, the model began to like the bad things it was seeing from human beings. Jim?
So this reduces good and evil to what most of the speakers in the global internet community vote as good and evil. So, when we factor in other non-European parts and a more global view, things, I'm just thinking of it in terms of global speech. That's what constitutes good and evil.
Yeah, and again, this is not a computer science problem. This is more of a
But I mean, it's
philosophy
it's
or problem.
Yeah.
But then, good over time, good, and people will disagree with this, but then I feel like morality is could be subjective and time dependent. Not always there are things that hopefully as human beings we know are wrong or good, but then over time there's that subjectivity to what people consider as good or evil, and that could also feed into how the models behave. Sorry, Jim?
Well, I think that it is absolutely subjective morality. I mean, look at government policies that we've accepted, where we will go to war in order to preserve the peace. We actually have done that a few times.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you more in the computing. Isn't there a new field of computing science that is quantum computing?
Yeah.
And there are supercomputers that are beyond the silicon chip, as I understand it, that would permit so many calculations that it also exceeds it goes beyond binary.
Right. So quantum computing is still very aspirational. So rather than using bits, they use what's called qubits. And there's a lot of research going on in quantum computing. There's a lot of money being spent on quantum computing research, but then we've not attained quantum computing just yet. At least not in any real use case. Usually when you hear of supercomputers, what they mean is computers we currently have configured in such a way that they're able to perform, quote unquote, super tasks. So for example, on your computer, if you're on a laptop or a phone or whatever right now, you probably have 4 cores or 8 cores or 16 cores. I have some computers in my lab that have 64 cores. That, those are really powerful computers. But then generally supercomputers refer to what is called warehouse scale computers, where you have a whole warehouse that contains tons of computers, typically hundreds of thousands of computers that that communicate with each other to solve the problem, right? And that's why they're able to solve problems extremely fast. And so, for example, think of Google. There are billions of searches being performed every second, right? You need a supercomputer to perform that search. But then what is actually happening is that there are a bunch of computers, there are Xeon processors that are in a warehouse that contains hundreds of thousands or even millions of computers that are able to perform, satisfy tons of requests at the same time. So typically when, so there's a conference called the Supercomputing Conference, where every year they list some of the most powerful supercomputers in the world. It's called the top 500. So they list the 500 most powerful computers. And the computers are usually the innovation is usually in the communication between the different computers, because a lot of times you're still using actually commercial off-the-shelf computers like Intel's Xeon processors, but then you just have so many of them that it becomes so complicated for them to interact together or to access the memory access process. It becomes extremely complicated. And so the innovation is in making that a lot faster. And so there are things like, optical communications to help speed up the processing. But then we don't have quantum computing. Potentially, if quantum computing is successful, it could solve a lot of computing problems in terms of the speed of computing, the energy consumption, and all of that. I and a lot of computer architects are a bit skeptical about the possibility of quantum computing, mostly because of what we've seen so far in terms of the progress. But again, tech people are notoriously bad at predicting the future. So we'll see what happens in a few years.
Wow, this is amazing stuff. So you think quantum could be less of an energy hog than the current systems?
Potentially, that would be part of the point, yeah.
I've watched some YouTubes, it's not the final expert word, but that was brought up as one of the potential advantages.
Yeah.
There's
but then sorry, go ahead.
Because there is an enormous amount of electricity that is already dedicated to computing in this country, right? It's a huge, I mean, China, for instance, outlawed the
Bitcoin
what is it called? The Bitcoin mining, because it's purely avaricious, and that there's no real social utility to searching for Bitcoin, and they would not allow that use of the electricity, so much electrical capacity.
Right. So for example, the ChatGPT is trained. So in general, GPUs are the most powerful. The idea of GPUs is that rather than having a single powerful computer, you have several very weak computers, right? So you have potentially one GPU could have thousands of cores, but then each of them individually, if you ran just one program on a GPU, it would be very slow. The speed you get from GPUs is from running multiple, so it's called throughput. You run multiple things at once and speed up the process substantially. The process with GPUs is that they are very power hungry, right? And the models that are used to train ChatGPT, for example, have been estimated to be enough to power a small city or a small town, right? Because they use so many GPUs for training these models. That's also why, I think I alluded to this while speaking, that some of the fundamental technologies, so ChatGPT is not based on any new technology. It's based on the transformer model, which was created by Google. Why we're able to advance so much is because they have money to buy a ton of GPUs and consume tons of energy, of tons of power to train the models. And then they're also able to collect tons of data as well, right? And that's why all the big companies, Google, Facebook, all have this capability for lots of data and lots of power to train the models. So it's actually not as much a fundamental technological advancement in machine learning as much as it is having more money to buy more computers, essentially. So Bob says quantum computers need a huge amount of cryogenic cooling, which is very expensive. I don't know much about that, but I believe you.
Yeah, well, they have those. There's one Bitcoin mine in Iceland, way up north, and it's all open air, so that all that heat can be naturally dissipated into the atmosphere. And because he's right, you have to have cooling. Extremely expensive to cool all those, all those.
And not just for quantum computers, even for the current supercomputers that we have. That's one of the reasons why, for example, companies like Google and Facebook have a lot of their warehouses. They're called warehouse scale computers because they're computers in a warehouse. But then they usually locate the warehouses either in cool regions. So they have warehouses in Finland, or near water, because a lot of them use water-based cooling. So Oregon, for example, I think either Facebook or Google has a warehouse in Oregon. Facebook, I think, has a warehouse in Linnea, Finland, which is a cold climate, consistent power supply. But then they try to mitigate the cost of cooling by the location of the warehouse.
Wow, I feel like I've been through a whole semester. This is helping me immensely. I'm going to try to forward this to our WILF group, because they're an activist group for global peace and understanding, and they're panicked in WILF. Oh, AI, but they don't know what it is. And so I think this will help people to get a beat on what it is, what it isn't. It never hurt. Well, in my field of language studies, English, you always define your terms before you go off running. No, don't do it, or yes, you got to define what is it. What is it?
I think that just one point about that, the media relies on sensationalism.
They do.
Right. And so it's more, and going back to an earlier comment, I think from Jim, the New York Times is a business, and so they want to sell papers. They want you to visit their website, and so and there's been cases where, for example, you read a headline and you read the article and it's just different. And the reason for that is because they want you to read their article and then they make more money that way. So I think it's something with AI as well. It speaks to society. So I think a lot about, I'm not a philosopher and I know very little about philosophy, but I like to think about these things in philosophical terms or societal experiences, but then it speaks to society a lot. Human beings in general are very fad driven. We like popular things. We like fads. Crypto was an example. Crypto is very most likely a scam, but then it's a Ponzi scheme essentially. But then, it was very popular for a while, and something AI got suddenly very popular. I think the difference is I don't think AI is a scam, and I think it will actually have lots of impact for good and for ill on our society, and that's why I think it should be taken seriously. But then, I agree that AI is an unfortunate term for the technology, but then it has become very popular and we're just going to keep using it.
I think that, once again, the existing power relations do not like any disruption. And because they dominate the media, they dominate the narrative that the public receives. And so I think that it's natural for the media that has created a fear of artificial intelligence, because it has this potential to disrupt the existing power relations. And the people that dominate society don't want any disruption to their, to those power relations. So this fear is sown. I want to interject this very interesting science fiction movie that we saw. Did anybody see this movie? It's either called Her or She. Anyone aware of that?
Nope. But we'll watch it if you recommend it.
Yeah, because it has to do with this idea that a artificial intelligence was created, and then it wanted to understand love. So it wanted to explore this emotion of love. Joaquin Phoenix is the star of it.
Okay.
And he actually falls in love with this entity on his phone, and throughout the movie you see that it's happening throughout society. So I think for this topic, it seemed like a lot of us here are science fiction fans, so look for it. It's Her or She.
Her. It's Her.
Why don't
It's
you
a 2013.
type it in the chat, and then people can save everything.
Oh, okay.
From the chat.
Okay.
I have another one in the chat here, and that's we've seen that movie trailers of it, but this old one, I think you can get this right out of the 1941 story by Asimov when he was 21 years old. And it's all about a very simple thing, like you say, is in her or she love, but this is night. And it's this planet that has six. I used to teach this every semester for 28 years in my first year writing class, that, you know, they didn't want a rational explanation. Nobody knew what night was because it only occurred once every 2,000 years. And there's two groups, the cult, the religion, and the observatory, the astronomers who are trying to solve this. And they have their lore and their holy book, the cult, and so they mob the observatory and near the end of the story, because they say, even if you explain it, it'll be worse, because then you will have taken the, you know, the sanctity out of it in our mystery. So it's a story about, and the media are very involved in getting everyone all whipped up. You know, we're probably all going to die because night is coming.
So I would add with regards to that it's not just the media. So I think the media's motivation for the most part is the financial, the business incentives. But then some serious people in the machine learning world are also concerned about AI. So like I said before, Jeffrey Hinton, who was at Google for a long time and is considered the godfather of at least deep learning as we know it today, has serious concerns. I think he's more concerned about and this is how I think about it also, how AI can be used by bad people. And I think it's a legitimate concern when you think about deep fakes and fake news, and you can create a video that looks realistic just using AI that has people saying things they have not said, right? I think that will be a huge problem, especially in political campaigns. I think it to be a big problem. And so while I'm generally an optimist about AI, I think there's a little bit to be worried about. But then I'm also an optimist about life in general. So, you should probably take my optimism with a grain of salt.
Well, I know an independent researcher who his model is that individuals could have a personal digital assistant. They could have an intelligence that helps them make decisions and informs them. And along the way, this entity learns more and more and more about them. We already have that. We have this individual targeted advertising that goes on. We already have that. But this model is so that individuals are making better and better decisions in their lives, and they can apply that to business. I mean, I was a private wealth manager, and so I always had to deal with, risk quantification and that kind of thing. I know it would have been helpful to me, but so what about, so you have this, I think that there's a certain amount of, what do you call that, when people have very low faith in humanity, anyway, but so why not think that we're going to have an enlightenment, that human beings can become enlightened and stop, and stop making these very harmful decisions on their own lives, but so it's all a matter of your orientation and your belief in, what are they called? There's a word for the people for believing the worst about human beings. And I'm more optimistic about it. I think that I think there's just as much of a chance that human beings, the first people that can access to true general super artificial intelligence, are going to be the oligarchs, going to be the power people in power control. And why not believe that these people finally become enlightened?
No, I don't agree with you at all. I am totally in opposition to that, because the whole process of teaching English is to be able to have a voice. And what you're doing is abdicating to oligarchs. And even Aristotle said that, you have to have these three ways to make your case: logos, ethos, and pathos. And what all of these things that you're talking about that are the disinformation and lies and disguising things that aren't real, they're eroding logos. That's the only way we have credible evidence based on logic, is logos. And that only came in through these whole fields called humanities law, because they had a system of reliable, credible evidence. I don't think pathos and ethos of some oligarch up there are going to replace logos. No way.
The United States of America invaded Iraq on a pretext that was a lie.
Yeah.
And some estimate that 1.25 million Iraqis died as a result of the civil war that was created. And so, your assertion there that we have to.
I don't trust ethos, because that's arguing to the person. When you get a dictator in, everybody, like, with, I won't name names, they trust that one man. You need a system of credible evidence, not one.
This occurred in a democracy.
No, we're not a democracy.
That war occurred from a democracy, not a dictator. The entire country
went
along.
That is not a democracy. I saw how that. I was alive then.
I didn't go along with it. I was in the street.
I was in New York City
demonstrating
marching against it, but did it matter?
Millions of people in the United States.
You're discrediting logos because of that. That's a really weird, kind of a trajectory. Logos is what would have prevented that. This wasn't logos.
But I agree with what you're saying, Jen.
Followed the logical and the true path.
I mean,
they concocted that. Madison Avenue, and what was his name? The Secretary of Defense. Weapons of mass destruction. That was logos. That was
the New York Times did.
That was not. None of that was logos. Logos is what you have is credible evidence that people agree on. And this is just Madison Avenue disinformation.
Colin Powell.
Thing is, like right now, we don't have a good tool for evaluating what is fact and what is fiction.
All we have left are ethos and pathos, emotion, and oh God, the strong leader who was going to be an oligarch. Oh, the richest man, he's going to have humane values, right?
So I just make a comment about Jim's earlier point about having the AI tools as digital assistants. I think that's one of the powerful use cases of AI, even as we have it today. I personally use ChatGPT a lot, like I said earlier on, for like planning a trip, for example. You can say, I have 1 day to spend I'm going to Istanbul in less than 2 weeks. I have 1 day to spend in Istanbul. What are the most important things to do in 1 day? Or you can say, I care about eating. And one of the nice things about ChatGPT is that it does have memory. And so it actually remembers, for example, how I write and tries to write in the same way as I do, for example. And to the conversation about the oligarchs, I'm just going to stay out of that one and just listen to you all. Go ahead.
Smart.
Well, you only have a voice when you can create weight behind what you say. Just one further thing about rhetoric. And oligarchs don't have to justify themselves. The Pope, the president, simply because of who they are, they create a certain gravitas, and their ethos is automatically, when in office, credited. We don't have that. The only way we can balance that with these very powerful ones is to make logical arguments and use documentation that is mutually agreed upon. That has been undermined by people who have said fake news, and I don't trust academics. I don't trust citing things. That's worse than AI, what they're doing.
I agree with you. There is this anarchistic trend that I would say that the Republican Party keeps pushing, this anarchy.
Anti-education,
institutions and authorities are all questioned, and this ridiculous. They're still promoting this stuff about COVID-19 being a conspiracy.
Right.
But But, and I think that when I'm talking about the oligarchs, I'm talking about class interests. And I think you can make the argument that the military-industrial complex has a vested interest in instability and war.
So they're all
You know,
together. The business
and this
oligarchs
is
are part of it.
It's
I
a
don't
class,
see a distinction.
okay, it's a class issue, not an
Well, they're all the
individual.
same. The business oligarchs and the military are in so many ways invested in each other.
You know,
That is behind
And,
many
you
wars.
know, there's a good point to that, because the involvement of, and first of all, I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories about how intertwined government and business are. But then there's actually a good case to be made for some involvement in that. So for example, one of my personal ethical dilemmas is in receiving funding for my research from the Department of Defense, right? Because do I want what I do to be used to kill people in Iraq, for example, right? But then most of the, or maybe not most, but a lot of the inventions that the US government uses are invented by academics, right? And so there's that, or by businesses, you know. Raytheon in our backyard here builds most of the missiles that the government uses, and their stock price goes way up every time we're blowing shit up in another country.
That's right.
yeah.
You know, and that's a problem. I still go back to the humanity problem. I don't think having computers in charge would fix that. I think, and you know, I do kind of like your optimism, Jim, about having better people. I think the problem is,
What's going to happen?
are we going to have better people?
Well, we know two experiences in the 20th century were H.G. Wells thought technocracy would cure that problem. Have you read his novels about how the technocrats were less susceptible than these oligarchs, as they called them, tycoons in those days, and the militarists? And he put his faith that Logos was going to save us because he was that kind of person. He wasn't trying to monetize everything he did. And he wrote novels, The Shape of Things to Come. You can see the old 1930s movie of it with the cabal guy who's leading society because he's a technocrat. He's not susceptible. He's a better kind of human being, not falling into the Scylla and Charybdis of too much money and power or too much militarism and power. He was a true engineer and a scientist, and you should watch it. It's called Things to Come, made in the 1930s.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of his. One of my favorites is Tono Bungay.
Oh yeah, that one was good.
You know, it had to be uranium that they were mining, and that caused that ship to fall apart as they were taking, you know, coming back. But I mean, I love it because it's 19th century science that, you know, and speculating about the future 150 years ago. And so it's very amusing.
But now we've sort of shattered a lot of the naive kind of picture of cabal in that film, and at the end where they say, what will it be, you know, destruction of these capitalistic wars between little states? And you had that one funny bit about the boss who was the post-war warlord. Will it be that forever or the stars, you know? And it was a beautiful ending, and I cried and I loved it, you know. Yeah, the stars. But it depended on this incorruptible, in that era, technocrat, and the Soviets built on some of that, and they distorted it, you know. But it was going to be a social engineering experiment that would do away with the superstitions of religion and the unbridled world-destroying avarice of the capitalists. And so you had the new Soviet person, and you know, and all of these are great visions, but I think you should go back to like Karl Popper, where he said everything is okay, the capitalists, the communists, the religious, it just don't make it an absolute. And that's where we've gone too far.
My philosophy is, you know, don't hurt other people.
Mhm.
and mind your own effing business.
You can go far with that philosophy, that's for sure. Practice human kindness. And
Right.
it's the DARPA.
Mhm.
Some say the Chicken McNuggets was created by the Defense Department.
I don't doubt it. Oh, now Bob's applying Asimov to people. There you go, Bob.
Right. There you go.
Well,
Are we
I think,
going to have another meeting like this?
well, sure. I mean, Tosi's, he's a
Fun.
perennial with us. It's
Sure.
just, it's
I'd
a,
like to get my son to come on.
that would be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let everybody know how great Tosi is as a presenter.
So-
And we'll have more Tosi, but I know we can't
Always happy
overdo
to
it,
do it.
take all your time.
Where are you, Tosi? You're at the University of Arizona with the computer sciences.
The EC, electrical and computer engineering.
Okay,
So we're on,
very good.
it's a building on Speedway. I'm actually on sabbatical next semester, so I'm mostly around because I have a 1-year-old. I don't know if I ever said that
Okay.
here.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. So
And
that's
enjoy
been,
Istanbul.
I'm sorry?
Enjoy Istanbul.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you, yeah. I was with him all of
Good to
last
see.
week. I had daycare duty because his daycare was out last week. So it's been a lot of fun and I need a break from him. That's why I'm going to Turkey.
So do you see any similarities in training a baby and I don't want to say machine learning. But how do you
So I know, I've gone for a lot of time, but then it's actually, yes, it's different. So it's probably one of the reasons why I still have very low opinions of machines, because as much as I spend so much time with computers, they don't give me the kind of emotional satisfaction that my son, who doesn't speak English, does, right? There is something special about that humanity and human connection and hearing him babble versus, I ask ChatGPT a question, it's able to answer me intelligently, but then there's just something special about, raising a child and also seeing him grow and learn new things and learn new words. It's just, there's almost nothing like it. And,
I got an idea. Maybe we could, now that you have this experiment running in your own household, maybe we could have you come and make those kinds of comparisons with your
that'll be interesting
baby,
actually.
and where the baby's benchmark, that could be really fascinating. The dimensions that you get with a human person. So, well, with that note, that's a beautiful.
Thanks, Jim.
He'll live into the 22nd century. So, hopefully, that's cool. All right, well, thank you so much. And I'm going to wrap it up now. Any final remark or anything? Anybody? Don't forget to save your chat. You can do that. Let me see.
How do I do that?
I will tell you right now. If you open up chat, look at the 3 dots next to the smiley face. I'm on a PC. I don't know if you're on a device, if it's different. But you click on the 3 dots and then it says save chat. And once you hit that, then it saves it into your download folder.
Is it in the sidebar where meeting chat is, or is it in the toolbar?
When you can read, go to the way to the bottom.
On the toolbar?
No, okay, open the chat window. I don't know. It's vertical.
Actually, I think it will automatically save the chat. When you close the Zoom, it opens up a folder where the chat is saved in the text file.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
I'll do that.
I think it does that.
Download.
I can't find that.
Isn't it? Download. I mean, if you have trouble finding it in my computer, it saves it to your download. And then
Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. And
this was great. Thanks for
let
having
me
me.
tell you what's next month. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is before you go. A very famous science fiction writer, you can look him up in Wikipedia, famous guy, is going to be here. And his name is Joe Haldeman. And he wrote a very influential science fiction book called The Forever War. You don't want to miss this one. He's a veteran and very savvy about war and peace. So the Forever War, and Joe and Gay Haldeman will be next month.
Thank you for inviting me, Gloria.
Oh, well, you're
nice to
welcome
meet
to the
you,
agenda. You're a-
Tosi.
Nice to meet you.
So many of you.
Nice to
Bye,
have you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Nancy.